So in a couple of minutes, Tim will be doing the sort of clickbaited title talk we've got, which is Ansible roles. You're doing them all wrong.
Oh yeah, it is. Maybe. I have one in my bag, but it's been a while. Is this yours or?
Mine.
Okay, I'll make sure to get it back to you. I just saw some Lenovo and Apple. This is an Apple approved.
Yeah. I can paint it right, just to fix it.
I'll just move it over if you want. Well, yeah.
Oh yeah. A works in this bit. I'm still disappointed. We didn't actually bring up
Similar setup in my lab. So I use
we did it with Tribe. We couldn't get the time.
Something oh, I see why. That would be why.
Yeah. Oh, you want to try plugging it in?
Yeah, I moved it, and I think I must have unplugged it.
These cables probably have somewhere.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Oh, I saw something earlier.
I thought maybe you had a button on your side that you needed to
Let's
press.
see, yeah, I'm getting it here as well. This is the YouTube. It's a bit delayed still, so that should. Yeah, see now I'm walking here,
Oh yeah.
and then we should get it.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, there we are.
So what am I doing wrong about roles?
Yeah. I had a feeling this was a draw.
So yeah,
All right. I guess I can't do it here, can I? Okay, put it down here and it will.
No, they have to do the other way around.
Oh, like
Just
this?
send it a bit, point it up.
Okay.
Might actually slow it up.
All right, you let me know, and if not, I'll switch it. Okay, so we're talking. So is that hello?
Hello.
Okay. These things distract me. Also my glasses. So I can try it away. Try it loud.
I mean, you technically don't need it.
I could carry the.
well for the
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's what. Is there a way you can check if you're picking it up?
well, it's actually picking up the speaker over there.
Oh.
It's not hooked up directly.
Oh. Okay. Sorry, I thought we had it direct.
No, only in the other room, sadly. This one doesn't have a.
I'll do a test before I get started, and I'll switch. This distracts me, and then my glasses.
Oh yeah. Tim, just remember, how long have you been Red Hat or Ansible?
So I'll be 10 years in July. It's
Almost-
coming up on
almost
10, and then on my 13 years with Ansible will be, also around July, August. It's only a few months over the time. It's long. Yeah, thank you.
so whatever we don't have, and the last one is whatever. You want to make this whole thing work?
Doing a quick mic check. People in the back, can they hear me? If I do this? How if I talk louder? It can be more of a New Yorker. No, still not loud enough?
That's the only way to get the free.
This microphone messes with my glasses.
You can point that the baby should move a little bit.
Is this any better? Any better?
Can you
No.
hear in the back?
No?
No. You're going to have to suffer it, Tim.
Still, all right. All right, do I do it this way? All right, maybe if I put it down, it won't distract me so much.
You've got space there? Well, we've got one more space in. Can you sort of shuffle in a bit, please? Everyone wants to find out how they're doing it wrong.
Right, it makes sense to someone who's knows what
No, you can stay.
just causing a fire hazard.
All right, is it better in the back now that, okay, all right.
I think there's a seat at the back as well here. There's a seat, we've got a seat here.
What?
We've got one seat here, one seat here. This one, another one just there. Now we've got another one here.
No. Yeah, let's listen to Tim.
If you want to come on this one, we've got a seat here. And I've got two seats here. One just there. One just there. If it gets warm, wait for me and I'll see if I can open any more windows. I think it's only one. It's a full house. I might open it. I'll open it in a minute. Right, well, thank you very much, everyone. I've known Tim the entire time I've worked at Red Hat. He's been here, or working on Ansible even longer than I. Almost a day, well, I guess almost 13 years, right? 10, 13.
Yeah, with the Ansible project, 13
With the Ansible
years.
project for 13
Almost.
years. I could shame Tim by saying if you got in any problems with synchronize.
Oh, yes. My one great contribution to the code base.
Because I want to make it clear, even though Tim is a product manager, he has got his hands very dirty over the years.
Yes.
But yeah, let's get started. Thank you, Tim.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gunvalo. Yes, as Gunvalo was saying, I've been involved with the Ansible project. I think I found it at my employer a few months after Michael DeHaan first opened the project, and then started making contributions from there, small ones, and then synchronized, and then the developer said, please don't ever send us a PR again. So now I'm a product manager and they don't let me code, but I do still stay really involved with Ansible and what's going on. These days, the areas that I cover and what's brought me to this topic is development tools. So a lot of the work that you hear us talking about in the development tools, Ganesh and Soren are here from our engineering team, other Rohit. They're all working on development tools, and I am the thorn in their side to what we should be trying to do or do next, or what we could do better. This sort of led to this particular presentation. I was actually talking to Brad Thornton. He's known as Ciderblock, if anyone's seen that name on the forums or on GitHub. He's a senior staff engineer that I work with, and we got on this topic of talking about roles, and that we thought people could be doing them better and they're not, and that's what inspired this talk that came out of it. So what I'm going to cover here, starting off, just briefly, a little just context setting. Would I be assuming wrong if everyone here is familiar with Ansible and has written some Ansible automation? Is there? Okay, just one. I am making that assumption going forward, but I'm still going to do a little bit of a brief history of roles and why roles, just to set a little bit of context for then what I'm going to say after that, because sometimes I feel like we lose track of why were they created and why are they there, that I just want to make sure that we have that context, and then talk a little bit about the state of roles over time, and then get into the main topic here that I think drew you all in, is why you're doing Ansible roles all wrong. And then I'm going to end it with Q&A, but also I have some questions for you. There's some things that we've been talking about, ideas that we have that I wanted to get some feedback, whether you get here in the room or you see me here in the halls tomorrow, or please come to the contributor conference tomorrow. I'll be there also. So that'll be, that's what we're going to cover here. So I'm going to keep moving on. Before I go any further, I just want to say that this is not going to be your typical best practices talk. This isn't going to be about how you should code or write your Ansible automation specifically. It's going to be more about how you design and construct your roles. It's going to be more along those lines. If you are looking for that type of best practices talk, these are two, well, one good and one suspect resource that's out there. The Ansible Community of Practices, Good Practices, has a whole section on roles and also on collections, which touches on roles. And then there's the Zen of Ansible, which when I gave the sponsor talk said that some clown had the audacity to take do a spin on the Zen of Python, but for Ansible. So you can check that out and get maybe some sense of the philosophy behind Ansible. I'm surprised Gummo didn't shame me with the Zen of Ansible. Since I also wrote that. Very missed the inside joke. Anyway, moving along. So brief history of Ansible roles. They were first introduced in November of 2013. So about a year and a half after the Ansible project first started. So that was Ansible core version 1.4 that came out. And the idea was that they were to be reusable building blocks of automation. Before that time, you would write a playbook, and if you wanted to share anything, you had to break it out into task files and pull the task files in and keep them between each. And then if you wanted to manage defaults and variables and all these other things that would go with that task file, was all up to you to manage. The idea was that roles created more of a container, I shouldn't use that word, but a means of distribution of those variables, defaults, tasks, handlers, all those things in one bundle. The idea there was to really try to start promoting portability and better organization of more sophisticated playbooks and automation that was out there, and to still keep it human readable. So the idea being that, well, you had modules and plugins, but that meant Python, and you had playbooks happening at that time. You could write the automation, but if you wanted to create something that was reusable, that you could distribute and give to others, there wasn't anything, and that's what roles were designed for, to bring into the Ansible automation world and the ecosystem. So the whole idea was to promote that consistency and standardization of automation, that if everyone was sharing the same roles within an organization, even if they were applying them somewhat differently, you could get a certain level of consistency and standardization across an organization or an industry or community or whatever it was. And then that would, having that standard would allow for collaboration and best practices to be shared more easily than just standard playbooks or task files and things like that. Gave you the ability then to also version that stuff and do a certain level of dependency management, which I could probably do a whole presentation on all my gripes with the dependency management of roles in the early days, but they're there. There is some of that there. So it was all reusable, and it just was crucial for the efficient and effective use of automation once it got more sophisticated and widespread, whether it was an organization or a community or the enterprise. All right, so the state of roles. They all started off initially as just part of playbook projects. It was just a subdirectory that hung off your playbook project there. Early on, it was introduced, you had Ansible Galaxy and the ability to pull a single role from a Git repo if you set up the Git repo the right way. So that was all well and good in the early days, and it got us there. But over time, it started to break down. There were limits to that simplistic approach. A lot of other things were happening I won't dive into, but it led to us taking a really hard look at how do we manage Ansible and all of its content. We had batteries included. It had all these modules in it. And I remember in my earliest days, it was like, oh, crazy, we went over 100 modules. You know, it was the very early days. It was it shipped with 100 modules. I think when we started looking at collections, we'd gone up over 1,000, and the projection was within 2 years we were going to go to like 4,000 or 5,000, and it just was becoming a huge problem. It was sort of a victim of our own success thing, in that the batteries included approach no longer was going to work. That led us to talk about and what resulted in collections, which then was first introduced in Ansible 2.8, which is around December 2018. That allowed for the separation and bundling of modules, plugins, and roles. So now we had a way to ship roles in a group. What happened though, and I'm not sure exactly why, we've still seen a strong continued use of standalone roles, which have not gone away. They're not going away, before anyone jumps to that or gets their hand up to ask that question. There's no plans to get rid of standalone roles, so they still remain probably from what I can tell, this is anecdotal, the predominant way that roles are used today, still in Ansible. The one thing though that we have seen, and this is now Tim, the product manager, starting to talk for a moment, is in talking to these customers and large enterprises that use Ansible automation in mass and with great sophistication, is that they're now trying to manage and deal with hundreds, and in some cases we've seen thousands of roles that have been written within their organization, in their enterprise, that from all the automation that they've done. So there's that issue that taking into consideration. Another one was in having gone through that entire arc of what led to collections, the design of collections and features that got built into core and into the platform and all the other parts, is that roles, and this is a bit of my own opinion, has lagged behind modules and plugins in terms of the functionality and the love that they got. What I mean is, for example, plugins and modules have very well-defined interfaces, right? You can tell what inputs will this module take. And if you give it the wrong inputs, you will get an error pretty quickly to tell you, no, that will not work. You ever try that with a role? And then you see that thing running, it's running, and all of a sudden it just goes, and it's because you gave it a bad input and it didn't, well, I sent it a string and it needed an integer there or something like that happens. That's like one example. Another area that I've heard and seen is documentation. In modules, there's a very specific way. Granted, it's embedded, and there's some issues with that embedded documentation, but there's a very structured way that you document what your module can do, that we can extract that and know this is what the module will do. There is no standard for roles. Okay, we create a README, but has anyone ever compared the READMEs of different roles from different authors? It's like sometimes you get the README that was generated when they started the project, and then other people write a book in theirs, which is nice. So thank you, Jeff Geerling. But there isn't a lot of consistency in, for example, in the documentation and roles, but modules and plugins got that. So when I make that statement, I'm referring to things like that out there. So that's the background. So how are you doing Ansible roles all wrong? Bit of a loaded title, but it got everyone here, that I have some standing room people, which is great. The biggest thing really is that roles really should be in collections. If you're not putting your roles in collections, I feel like you're doing it wrong. And I know it's a harsh statement, but what I mean by that is that you're really selling yourself short of the potential of what you can do with Ansible and where it is going with the tool, also with the platform and AWX and all that work that we're doing. So let me just dive into that a little bit more specifically and see if I can make my case for you on that. Before I go any further, how many people are putting all their roles in collections? Okay, so that's quarter, a third, maybe. Okay, so this is part of the reason why I wanted to have this dialogue and do this presentation, even if it got things thrown at me. Which this is my fourth one, so I know what this crowd is like. I've had things thrown at me, so I'm good. I'm ready. I'm from New York. This happens to me all the time. So there are some definite advantages to roles and collections that you just don't get from roles and standalone roles. The number one that I always point out is that you can share plugins, and that also includes modules, because really modules are just a form of plugins, but they're so important we often break them out. But that you can share those modules and those plugins with the roles that are all in that same collection. So that, I think, is a really reason that they move around as one, I keep wanting to say container, and I gotta stop saying that, one bundle, one distribution there. The other thing, and it was a necessary evil for when we did collections, it was something we obsessed and tried to avoid, but it's just no way around it, was the improved namespace capabilities, the ability to do namespacing. I know some people love it, some people hate it. Like I said, we had some really long, heated debates, and this is where we ended up on that one. So as I said, another thing is that, and you see this, we see this a lot just looking in Galaxy, is Galaxy before collections was one role. That's all it could be. And if you had a bunch of roles that were sort of similar or the same, there was no good way to bundle them. Well, now a collection allows you to bundle like roles together in it, and there are advantages to that I'll get to in a little bit, to that grouping. Another is, and I can say this with great authority as the product manager for developer tools in Ansible, is that there's a lot of DevTools support that is around roles and collections that won't happen for standalone. Whether it's just functionally not possible, or it's just, hey, we only have so many resources, we can only deal with one thing, and that would be roles and collections. So you'll also lose the benefit of what is to come and is already here actually with developer tools by sticking with standalone roles. One thing I don't have in the slide I should mention is that there is still room for standalone roles. It just should be more of a limited exception than we typically use it for. Let me just say that much. Like if you're writing a playbook and you're trying to organize it better because it's a bit, it's getting a little, it's getting more sophisticated, we'll call it, maybe a little messy, hard to read, and you want to break it out into a standalone role to help organize it, I think that's fine. Just know that that role is not going to be reusable and not very portable. And when you're starting to get into why this should be reusable, this should be portable, I need this version, that's when you should, at that point, move to a collection. So if it's that very limited, hey, I just have a lot of tasks and I would like to organize it a little bit better, and you want to have a standalone role for that, that's still okay. And that's why we're not getting rid of it. But like I said, that should be the exception more than the rule. So didn't put that in the slides, so that's the bonus all of you get and all you people get that are watching this video later. All right, that sidebar now over, moving right along. I forgot to start my timer, so just remind me when I'm...
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
15.
All right, cool. So there are more advantages to roles and collections. You get the benefit of Python namespacing too. The way that Ansible manages collections is very Python-centric, that you have the access to Python namespacing. It's more of a developer thing that comes up. And by the way, anyone that was complaining about that they couldn't use dashes in their role names anymore when we switched to collections, this was why, because we're using Python to load, and Python doesn't like dashes, therefore we can't like dashes, and then everyone had to change the names that had used dashes. I think that time is over, but this is the great part about being an old timer. You know where all the bodies are buried. Okay, so then collections are, you can include collection, since collections, sorry, let me rephrase that. Since collections are included in the Ansible community package, there's potential to have roles added to the Ansible community package in the form of a collection. So if you're a contributor that's working on one of the community collections and you want to ship some roles in the Ansible community package, you have the ability to do that now. In the past, Ansible never shipped with roles ever. There wasn't a way to do that. Collections gives us that ability that now there's the option for shipping roles as part of the Ansible community package. I think I already mentioned that, and this kind of plays off the DevTools things, that future Ansible content development is going to be content-based in terms of documentation and tooling. The other thing, and this is, I maybe should have brought in an example of this, is that because you can have multiple roles in a collection, it enables you to have easier, smaller, purpose-built roles and ship them together. One of the patterns I've seen, and this is where I maybe should have brought in a example of this, is I would see a role that did like 6 things. And the first thing did is it called a main, and the main essentially had dispatcher code to say, if this variable now called this task, load this default, or excuse me, these vars. Because they wanted to ship that as one thing, they built it all into one role. Now with collections, and since you can ship multiple roles in one collection, you can write one for each of those, I said 6, so 6 different functions as 6 different roles and ship them as one collection. And it just simplifies your code a lot more, and you don't have to build a dispatcher and that person has to learn some variable that they have to call. At some point, there was the idea of adding the, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the task for parameter and the defaults from parameter, and then everyone would have to, then it was like, instead of the dispatcher, you building your own dispatcher, you just had to put in all these different parameters to, well, I'm calling this role, but I have to call this task for and this var from and this default from in order to get that function. But if I want this function, I would have to call this set. You can avoid both of those scenarios by creating smaller, more focused roles and shipping them in one collection. So that's what I was getting at there. I'm sorry, that was a lot. Hopefully my hand gestures was as good as the code to show you an example of what I mean. But I'll have to remember that this is, by the way, my first time giving this talk. Continuous improvement here. So the next time you see it, I'll have that in there. One other thing I thought I would mention that one of my colleagues pointed out when I shared my deck is you can then use the Ansible development environment or AID for dependency management. Who is familiar with ADE? Come on, Ganesh, raise your hand. Okay, okay, that's what I figured. This is part of the Ansible development tools, and it's a lesser known tool, but it is, I liken it as virtual environment, but for Ansible. And what it does is it can create a sandbox of a certain Ansible core and certain versions of libraries and collections in its own virtual space to do development and then allow you to switch to another. But it has the capabilities for doing dependency management that goes beyond just other collections. It gets into Python and binary dependencies. We actually have a lot of plans to do more with that tool. You don't get that if you're doing a standalone role. You will get this as roles being part of a collection. You do get this benefit of this tool, and this is, like I said, a tool we're going to be working on more and adding more functionality to, or integrating with other tools. Is actually, there's been a lot of discussion with ADE lately internally. Yeah, so moving right along. Last one, I'll keep it brief since this is a little product related. But it is worth mentioning, is anyone working in their day job with AAP? Okay. So again, another about quarter to a third of people. There are advantages. In fact, standalone roles really aren't supported very well in AAP. So if you're doing work that you need or want to be used in an AAP environment, you really need to go the collections route. Collections can be added to the execution environments AAP and AWX use. So then you also get the benefit of the auto install, Python dependencies and stuff like that. There's secure supply chain stuff that, again, if you're an AAP user, I'm doing this really quick for just, I promise this will be the end of any mention of anything product commercial related. And then the other is that you can co-locate roles within EDA. So it's just that the platform AAP has built-in functionality if you have roles and collections that you just don't get if you're, again, doing standalone roles. So if that's the area you're working in, this is another reason to use roles and collections. All right. So some other ways, I already hinted at some of this already, this is again, still sticking a theme of ways that people are doing roles all wrong, is I still see a lot of roles without meaningful readmes for each role. It's still out there. I don't know, it just seems like common sense, but hey, life happens and you forget, or you don't get back there. Things like missing license files. You really should have a license that define your terms of use and modification. And the other is, if you are shipping roles in collections, hooray, but please document it then at the collection level that those roles exist and give links to the README to the individual role. So those are some finer points that sometimes people started down the path of roles inside of collections, but then don't kind of finish the job, so to speak. All right, some other overlooked practices. Again, this is somewhat anecdotal. I wish there was a way to just look at everyone's work and make a defined survey, but we looked at even what we were just doing internally within Red Hat, within the Ansible team, and one of the things that is rarely do I see, and let me ask the group, how many people create argument specs for their roles? Right, that's like 5% of you. You really should be creating a argument spec for every role that you write. The idea is that it first of all ensures what is it that my role is going to use? What are the inputs it cares about? And to do it in a way that is communicated effectively, that someone doesn't have to read through your code to figure out, well, what do I need to give it? What data type is that variable using or expecting, or what, what values are valid or allowed? Things like that. Some people put them in their README, which is great, but we have something built into Ansible already today that does this, and then it has a functional use in that you can then use that to validate quickly, do I have the inputs that I need? Are they the right data types that I need? And then to be able to fail fast. So instead of running and then that 5-10 minutes in or whatever it is, the automation dies, you can do that right up front. As soon as someone calls the roll and they've not given you the sufficient inputs or bad inputs to be able to say, hey, this isn't going to work, I'm stopping right now. And that's what ARG specs are for. So that's one that I just feels like it's been overlooked, that again, that I see vast majority of people, the show of hands here, I think was a demonstration of that, aren't doing that today, and that's where you're doing it wrong. Another, and this goes back to what I was just saying a little while ago, is that still see a lot of roles that have many different entry points to the role, where you're calling the role and then you have to call the variable or use task from for it. really recommend that more people do these minimal, well-defined entry points rather than allowing for all that complex dispatcher logic in your main or using all the different parameters that you get in the include role. And again, that goes back to, well, if you're making a collection, you probably did that with all those different switches and modes because you're doing a standalone role because you can only ship one role, not a collection of roles. And that's why you created it that way, where now you can do all these smaller, more focused roles and ship them as one collection. So it's all comes back there. And then this is the third one that I always like to point out, and I don't know if it's like, I guess it's because, like I said, I'm an old timer that I picked up on. Also, I did all the best practices talks in the Zen of Ansible and all that. If you're, it's always been common rule, and I'll say it again. If you're writing programming code in your playbook, you're doing something wrong. Like YAML really sucks for doing coding or doing programming. And yet I still see in roles people attempting to do that because they're trying to do something a little more sophisticated in a role, something a little more reusable, and then they're still trying, they're then trying to program, whether it's like crazy Jinja strings or something like that. It is, I believe, perfectly fine to write a custom module or plugin that only is useful to that collection and put it in there. I was reviewing some code, yeah, they still let me do that, a couple of years ago. One of our developer did, it was around a set of roles, and they had the crazy like conditional strings. That was another one too, it was like, really long conditionals. And I said to him, so why don't you just create a filter plugin that does all that in Python? Wouldn't that be easier? He said, oh yeah, it would be. I said, well, why didn't we? It's a collection. You can ship that plugin. He said, well, no one else would reuse it because that's only for that. And I said, yeah, but okay. Not every plugin has to be reusable to the world. So my recommendation to them is like, yeah, if you find yourself in that spot and you have some Python skills, create a specific module or create a specific filter plugin in Python that does it better, that ships in that collection that only the roles in that collection use. And I think that's perfectly fine. So it's another overlooked thing that's out there for doing roles more effectively is to use modules and plugins sometimes. All right, I guess I should pick it up here a little bit. So there are still shortcomings in roles as they exist today. Everything I've said so far is out today. Some of it's been out for years. But there still are, as I see it, some shortcomings in the way that Ansible roles are implemented today. I don't feel that documentation is up to where it should be. It's still too difficult to find and understand if it exists at all. I already said where you get the person that created the initial stub and then never filled it out again, and then the person that wrote copious ones, which is again wonderful, but you don't have that consistency there. The issues about the interface, and by that I mean the lack of ARG specs, the way that you could do task from or a dispatcher, all different ways of approaching that. And then just there's this accumulated, these different legacy issues and shortcomings come together that create then portability and maintainability challenges of where you don't know what the consistent docs are, you don't want to know what the consistent interface is, there are all these different approaches, and so then that all cumulatively comes together to make it really hard for larger scale users and large scale deployments of Ansible to manage and reuse all of these roles and automation content out there. So these are today still shortcomings that I feel we need to look at and think about, what can we do better. So that leads me to, I'm starting to get into the Q&A part. So yay, almost done with me. But these are some ideas that we've heard, started to hear, and I'm curious what the room thinks. What do they think about my talk? And also some of these ideas or ways that you find roles painful and what you think could be done better or what you would like to see added to some part of the Ansible ecosystem. Like I said, these are just a few ideas that in talking this to people and our own observations, talking to users, customers, whatnot. Don't be shy. Oh, of course, Carol. Hi, how's it going? What's that?
Idea is simple. So if there is a argument specification,
Mhm.
which basically describes all the arguments,
Mhm.
and there is a README file,
Yeah.
it should be more or less standard or recommended way to take argument specification and get parts of the README file.
Okay. Sounds great. I like that.
Question for the audience.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you for reminding me that. So the common question from the audience was, if we're using arg specs and that's a standard way and we have a README, there should be a way to consume that arg spec and insert it into the README itself for you. So you just do it once and it comes through. And I think that's a great idea and something for us to definitely look at. It actually is that second bullet point under Ansible Creator. So sanity check. I love it. Yes.
Did it.
What's that?
You already did it.
We did
The
it?
Ansible doc tool can already consume argument specs and generate everything you need for documenting the role.
Does it insert it into the README for if it's statically published?
I'm doing it in my Galaxy collections. So
Okay, well, awesome. We'll have to look at that more. I don't think that's common practice, but that's great to know. Thank you, sir. So to answer that question or that comment for the tape, Ansible docs can read the arg spec, and then that can be used, I guess, by piping something into your README to insert that for you. So same function, maybe we'll try to make that even more straightforward, but that's a great approach. That's very good. Okay, yes.
Yeah, a more practical question maybe. I see a pattern developing where we have multiple collections, let's say the order of 10 collections. Each has about 20 roles, and I see in every role I see the same initial stands of asserts. So they say, am I on a Red Hat family system? Am I this? Am I that? So it's a bunch of asserts which are the same across every role in every collection.
Yeah.
And it feels messy to me.
Yeah.
Isn't there something like a constructor that automatically gets called when you first start using a collection, so I could just put that in one spot instead of copying it over? Whereas we are now thinking about changing those, and then we need to do a text edit, search and destroy, and replace all of these occurrences.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the question is having many roles, where a lot of the roles are looking at what is the operating system and the version of the operating, is it RHEL 8, is it RHEL 9, that sort of thing, and then having to write those asserts in your automation, repeating that over and over again. That's a great point, and it's something I think we should look into a standardized way of doing that. I don't know if this is where product manager and why they took away my keyboard. I don't know if that's a module that we make that sets all that stuff for
like
you,
having
or
a constructor on the object basically.
right? Yeah. No, I see what the point you made. I don't have an answer for it. There isn't anything, but I think that's a really great idea to look at and to discuss what's up. Because it is a very common pattern. I can remember from my very earliest days that if RHEL this, if CentOS that, if Ubuntu this.
So we're not doing it wrong, but it is wrong to have to do that.
I think there's definitely room for improvement in that area. Since a lot, I did a survey, I'm sure most people in the room have had to do that. Yeah, that's a good one. Any more questions? How am I doing? Still
Got 10 minutes.
10 more minutes. Oh wow, okay, I got a lot of time for more.
If we are having discussion on this, I have an idea how to do that. Exactly the thing discussed.
Okay. So Carol in the back has, you're in this room? In
No, not.
Oh, you okay? Sorry, it's not your talk later.
Time, I think we can at least discuss, right?
Okay.
So the idea to the question before, how I do that. So in argument spec, I just add one parameter, which has only one value, true.
Okay.
So you can then you evaluate. So instead of setting this parameter, you just create basically a function or a list of values which should be all true, like this real version and so on and so on and so on. And argument spec will evaluate this parameter for you when you start a role. That's all.
Okay. So roughly, just for the camera, that you can put it. There's a way to put in a parameter in your argument expect that will evaluate it and then do a lot of the work that you were asking to do.
Exactly.
So I guess we'll have to do a blog post or a forum post on that one. Get that out there. See, this is why I want to have these conversations with all of you. It's like I learned so much. Yes. So okay, go ahead. Question.
Since I'm also kind of the old school and started Ansible when it was 0.4, that we understand Ansible as a progression. So you have the Ansible ad hoc, which has the modules, you can call them. So it's like a command line.
Right. Yes.
And we have progressed to writing that into a playbook, which is same modules and the same parameters. On top of that, we have progressed to have roles, which for us the advantage to having roles was to be able to ship them, but not only to be able to ship them, but to put a little bit of more complex logic inside. And I'm an early adopter of the molecule, so for us molecule was basically the best thing that happened to roles, because we were able to test the roles and even abuse molecule in ways to create infrastructure and provisioning. So that way we didn't need Terraform. So I'm not using Terraform to this date because I can mimic everything with molecule and can provision with Ansible native. So that also gave to us a possibility to stay within the same technology. I was running with a very large infrastructure, 200,000 computers or more. So then you need developers to stay within the same technology. But what happens now is with the collections, we don't have a clear way on how to test it with the molecule. And we like to keep the roles independent and drag them into different collections because that's what we are packaging and send to our customers. But still, we like the roles to perform whatever they were doing. And we have this discussion, but it's not based on the assets like the other colleague here was mentioning. They are just based on the Ansible facts, and they choose a path, like the natural path to be executed for the task at hand. So about the documentation, we were using the Ansible project, which was an old project which was generating readmes. It's abandoned now, and nobody found resources to discuss it, but that was in our pre-commit hook. So when we were pre-committing something in a role, which is its own Git repository, then the documentation was generated for you. And so we didn't have missing documentation. And the Ansible, and there are a couple of other efforts that stopped too, to generate documentation for the role, like to generate the variables and to try detecting what the role is doing. Of course, today we have these AIs that we can ask, like, what is this role doing, and they are writing it for us. But what I'm worried a little bit is that you are, somehow it feels like the role is going out of its natural scope that we found it. It's this progression. So we have an Ansible command that you can run, then you have a playbook, and then you have a role, and then you have a collection. And I think, I don't know how to express it, but the role importance should stay the same, and we should have the choice of using it as an independent role, because this is the only thing that I need. The rest is there in Ansible. I'm installing an Nginx, for example. I don't need a collection to install Nginx. I can just do it with one command, with one playbook, or with one little role.
Okay.
The question would be when we can use molecule, or if it's in the plan to use molecule to test roles and collections, or
Right. Okay.
how we go.
So okay. So there's a lot. Yeah. No. There's a lot. There's a lot in there. All right. Let me start unpack especially for the recording. So the main question that or at least the question you ended with is when molecule and roles, written molecule and collections. I think that was a fairly easy one for me to answer, which is we're putting right now a lot of work into Molecule as we speak. If you go in there and look, right now, and I was just talking about this down at the Ansible table a couple hours ago with a few people. It is a part of Ansible development tools. Like it is now an official supported part, and that Red Hat is putting engineering resources into it. In getting it there, the first thing we had to do was get it into a state where Red Hat felt we could support it as when it went into the downstream. So that work happened. The work that has been happening now is, and I should mention early on, we bolted on some features to make collection testing possible, but we knew it wasn't where it should be. So now we're doing the where it should be part. and it started off with, and this has been the challenge with Molecule. Not that it's bad, but it's just the way it is. Molecule was created by people outside of Red Hat and the Ansible team, which is wonderful. But they had to make some very educated guesses on the way things should work. So there was that. The other is that Molecule was created before collections existed. And then it was created really before Python 3 was in widespread use. And the original maintainer job, life stuff happened, said, hey, you want to take this because I can't. We took it, it mostly sat in the community. And now we've decided to pick it up as we need to really invest in this. What we're up against now is that it's Python 2 code and code written for when collections didn't exist. So the first few months have been some of our most senior Python developers trying to convert all the code from Python 2 to 3 and then not break everyone who's used Molecule before. So that they're nearing that endpoint where the code is finally in shape and we don't think we've really broke anyone in the process of that. So now the work that you're going to start see happening and coming out in Molecule is ways to more efficiently test whole collections. I only have a top line view of the features. My understanding is, like, for example, like one of the biggest problems we saw with Molecule was that, or at least when you had roles and collections, it would spin up your environment, it would run the test for one role, tear it all down, and then rebuild infra for the next role. And that was very inefficient, but it was because, like I said, collections didn't exist, and then it was bolted on. Now they're doing the work and laying the foundation that you could spin up that infrastructure once, do all your role testing on that same infrastructure, and then tear it down, which should be a whole lot faster. And then the ability to share between those test runs, things like that. So that's the initial work that's being done in Molecule. So if you take anything away from all I just said, is that we're committed to Molecule and we're doing a lot of work on it, but we're not through it all. There's still a lot of work to do there. Okay, so that was the main part of your question. On that particular docs project, I don't know which one that is, but
It was called Ansible. So,
okay.
But
Say the name again?
Ansible.
Ansible, okay.
Yeah, it was an interesting effort because Ansible Galaxy was not very mature.
Yeah, okay.
6-7 years.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one, so I don't know that one. There's another one that I've heard called Docsable.
But what I'm saying
Yeah.
is that there were a couple of efforts to
Yeah.
generate readmes.
Right.
And I can tell you from my perspective how I understand why developers are not writing readmes.
Right.
It's because there is no dopamine hit. So when
Right.
I'm doing a task and
That's
it
a great
succeeds,
line.
I want to go to the next task and I don't care about the documentation.
Right.
So we-
Right. I totally agree with you, and that's where I would like to see something added on that, to exactly that. We probably won't pick up a project like that because it would probably be easier to look at what it does functionally and add it to something we have. And that's an area, and the most likely place I would like to see it added is in Ansible Creator, is to have a docs command, and that docs command can do different things for you in that regard there. The third one that I heard in there that's an interesting use case. So the third one, sorry, I keep forgetting about the people listening to the recording, is having independent roles and then being able to assemble them into a collection to ship out.
I can explain where the use case is, and
Okay.
then you will understand how wrong we are using roles.
Okay.
So if I have a new customer, I am creating a role for that customer, which holds the variables and other particularities of the customer. So that's a role, but it's just syntactic, a role. It's not a role, it doesn't do anything. But it's very easy for me to load it with include role. So then I have my regular roles that I deploy, I don't know, I provision some infrastructure, I do some EC2 machines, and then I put an Nginx there. But if I have a new customer, I create a role, I don't know, customer configuration management campus. And in this role, I make all the specifications that the other, so it's like a pre-collection mindset, because it was done before the collection, and I'm using it like this. But this is very good for me because I can use molecule with it. So then I can effectively test everything for that particular project before shipping it out to the customer. And,
Without going into all the specifics, I could see a few different things that we have in the works or might do that might help you in that case. There's another one. Let's see, did it make it on here? Oh, yeah, right above the docs command. We talked about like an import feature that would take a standalone, you could point at a standalone role and say add it to this collection and essentially import the role. So the thinking there, and that script exists today out there, but I don't think it's been touched for 2 or 3 years. The idea that you could, this was to, hey, you have all these standalone roles, let us help you out, and you can move them into collections and make the cut over. But I was wondering if you could use that same thing to assemble the collection you want. That's one approach. The other is if you're building an execution environment, you could just have the collection with the variables and then a list of dependencies on those other collections with the roles that you want for that customer, and then that gets assembled when you do the execution environment build.
that is a good solution.
Have you got any more slides?
Cool.
Okay.
I'll just leave that one up, and we'll have to wrap this up in a second. But
Yeah, I don't want to take more time. I think there is discussions there. But when I was talking about the progression, is I also teach some people DevOps and Ansible, and we are used to going from one small task to a different task, to a role, to a collection these days, to writing a module to fix some of the things. And for me, the role seems pretty good where it is, should be removed or downgraded in any way.
I see what you're saying. I guess it's a different. It's looking at the same thing differently, maybe.
Collections, I see them just as a packaging.
Okay.
Packaging means, and roles, it's a functionality, so it's completely different.
Right. And
if you have to have namespace and everything, but if you have only one role, you want to ship it to 5 customers, you have 5 collections.
Right. Right. I see what you're saying. I'm getting the hook here, as they say. Exactly. So I'm going to have to stop. But I guess there's a, well, first of all, if you haven't heard before, please join the forum. This is where we're trying to post and talk about these sorts of things. If you want to contribute to anything else, there's a second code up there for that that will help you out. I think there's a break. There's waffles.
Folks, just before we go, can we make sure we give Tim a round of applause, please?
Oh, yeah.
And now you've got a difficult choice. You can either stay and ask Tim awkward questions, or do our waffles downstairs?
Yes. So talk to Tim or waffles.
Yeah.
Those are your choices.
And we'll be back at 4 p.m. to talk about creating modules as easy than you think.
Sorry, no, sorry.
It's like all meeting.
I'm
That's very interesting. It was written a month or weeks ago with the lead engineer, the DevTools engineering.
They might need to try that out themselves. It already works.
Okay. I'll have to ask you what
Wow.
specifically in mind.
Person asking questions or the one?
No.
There's an unwritten social etiquette.
Yes, and some people can't keep Well, one of the problems that I sometimes have with a conference like this, that has nothing to do with that. Some people are asking questions, but they don't want to ask a question, they want to tell a story.
Oh yes.
And then I think, is there anywhere a question in there? Or just like
Don't worry about that. That's not.
a discussion between the guy and
No, exactly.
Yeah, someone just sent me a link to that one.
Yeah, Michael the Ham.
Oh, okay.
Well, Michael the Ham told him, I don't even get it, there's also Ansible.
I'll have to go back.
They went in
But I agree, like, you were you both around for the state of the community. That's my whole point of all this, is like, just a load of stuff that we need to fix. It's broken. I think this is like the next step.
And I always think that when people have that much comments that they don't like stuff, make your hands dirty and get into it.
Yeah, but I love all these little
that part works great. It was
like Ansible then, all-time community project.
But it's now part of the Ansible family.
I mean, Ara's the main contributor is still David Simon, DMS, right? But it's in the Ansible there.
it's like they go in here.
And this is the awesome list. So like Ansible Channel doesn't necessarily support it, we should still get them on that. Because it might solve
Because we are in the
specific
Ansible family. And if the original author abandons it, then it will probably still keep alive.
Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons that the GitHub Orgs exist. Because back in my day, I used to use Perl, right? So you have the CPAN library. And it's basically just a collection of dead places that no one has got the ability to get in. We put stuff in the community.
You can't even.
One of the GitHub namespaces. So someone comes up and can give them.
That's what in the early days happened with a huge amount of modules. People kept donating modules, but absolutely none of them were maintained.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's why we have Community General, which is known as the dumping ground. Dumping ground of what? Well, I'm not allowed to swear. But yeah.
So if you're doing good stuff.
It's too late.
Yeah, please.
I know, we had a discussion earlier.
Yeah, no, I mean, ask him more questions. I should have done that.
And one of the arguments to a role is not valid for that role, then Ansible will tell you it's not valid.
Does it also?
It can't always.
I was a bit. I do a lot with dynamic images because sometimes I have lists of roles. I basically have a way of configuring per host how I want to roll these roles on them. And I have a list of static roles. Does it also handle the dynamic includes?
No, it's not actually running.
Okay.
So anything can't be known statically. It can't tell you.
Yeah, that's the Ansible. It's essentially running, parsing it than it is actually running Ansible.
Static analyzer.
Yeah.
Okay. I had a question with regards to standalone roles and moving the collection.
Oh, thank you.
So I currently have.
Yeah, good.
I don't know how many.
Looked at the discussion now.
They're all standalone.
Are you focused around on Wednesday?
Big block, which is probably going to split up into a collection.
Yeah. Well, this is all
But
about
those have
second half,
separate
right?
files.
Everything
I make a
we've done
collection
has been planting
in which
seeds
I
around these
dump all the
topics.
roles together.
There's a load of stuff we
How
can
would
improve.
you?
And some of it is how do we pull together
Now,
all
how
these
to make a
different tools.
collection
And none of us should stand here
which are
individually and do
different
that, right? We need to
development types.
collectively get our thoughts together.
I now just collect them, make a version table, and then dump together and work on it.
like 5 years ago.
No, before collections then, yeah.
Yes, I was. I think
You can take your current thing and say this is now a collection at most. With
Yeah, 2.9, 2.10, but 2.9 was the last sort of batches
the whole company name, does products, and then we have all the roles that we used to have in a certain repository.
I thought it started with NARC, like like install a collection.
Yeah, they are still in there. They are still in there. Except that the GitHub repository. Only now they are not a GitHub repository with roles, but a GitHub repository That's Jan with roles.
Yes, but then now I have collections are really
14 different roles, but all of them individually.
because
Because that's
you're
how
dealing
That
with
makes sense,
stable branch policy.
It's technical debt, depending how you do it. Like,
Yeah.
you know, were we to start today, we would do things.
What you basically said
But
is
we
instead
don't.
of
We have all
having
this
one
history.
repository with one role, you have one repository with
It's
one
the balance
collection with
between,
one role.
well, do you start?
Yeah, except you also must have
You've got a lot of education and tooling and lots of so
integer.
the one night, oh, I've got to do this simple thing, you just go over
Yeah,
and roll.
otherwise it will die.
Oh, yeah,
Roll,
Galaxy
roll,
won't-
roll,
yeah,
and then, you know,
Galaxy
you
won't
go
take,
from
but
sense to
I-
No, the Galaxy will take, but you can still like, you're not using Galaxy now.
Yeah, but what if you want to install collection by purchase?
But we're an automation group, right? We should be able to find some automated way to use
And what will you
collection
get
or
in the output
maybe
of
something that doesn't
Galaxy?
necessarily fix everything, but goes, I can fix these things, these 5 things, I don't know how to
I
fix.
don't know. I don't use Ansible Galaxy
Yeah, you
command.
will just-
No, I don't use the Ansible Galaxy command.
Thank you for cooking
You have an Ansible collection.
No. Because it's not that close. You get like you can go
Yeah, sure.
together. He mentioned about writing conditional logic analysis, which we all do. And then there was the comment about having like a bunch of setup code to analyze facts.
There is no, there's nothing.
The reason that I ended up doing those things is because there's
You can clone it. Yes. That's
I
what I
like
do.
that.
Clone it. That's Ansible
the
Galaxy.
module could go do a bunch of stuff and
every
set
turn.
7 facts for you, and then the role could react to how those facts are set. I would write it in Python. But I can't. There's no way for a module. Technically, there is a way. It's not a supported in every having issues with setting facts. Because Python is solid, but it's not like you're not
And therefore, I mean, we're
break it in
very, I mean, we enforce our
Example,
regulatory breakage.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's, I mean, I know that's been come up in the community many times.
Yeah,
It'd be really nice to be
so there's
The structured way, which is run the module and use the
I'll probably look
parameter to capture it and then
So
set
then you have
facts.
to do set facts. So at that point,
We should be able to-
you're basically duplicating all of the work the module will do.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about it. If you if you set facts in the appropriate place, is that an addition or an override? If those facts was there before, would it deal with the crime? So the answer is no, can't be doing it incorrectly.
But it's just
Right.
a matter of how you move stuff actually in between.
like if you do
So just, I don't know how do you deal with the variable names in
the machines that it
roles within a collection. Do you have the rule of adding
Like a
variables
group
about the
brackets?
collection namespace,
not
or
limit but group by. So I have like
it's a best effort
I have a
way?
multi-tenant sets, and each of the
I
tenants has basically
still think
tenant
it's the old
underscore
practice
and
of a
then
prefix.
ID.
Of
It's
the
the
name of
better
the
way
role.
of going,
When I'm running
yeah.
Ansible playbook against
Okay.
our site, I want
That's
to
an
basically
area that
make sure
is a
that
little bit
it
outside
only
of
starts when there's
of
enough executors
where I've
available
been
for the
working.
entire
Okay.
to answer that. It's some of the other engineers that we have. I'm the only
Now
PM
it
here.
just
Uh,
takes
so
a
you-
list alphabetically.
Yeah, that's
and
where it
starts
goes
running
into because
the playbook we
I-
just did.
I was making,
I
I
want to
made,
make
just
sure
made the
that
cut
the
over to
playbook
being a
runs
product
against
manager
all
right as
three
we
of
were
them at the
starting to
same
figure
time.
out collections.
Yeah.
So I'm still have the old school mentality when it comes to
saying there
Okay.
seemed
variable management.
confusing to me.
Yeah, because basically we try
yes,
for
you can
start to
have
standardize also the variable names within rules match the collection
is
quickly.
dynamically
Makes sense. So I
Yeah.
know that's
why
why
I
I
think
don't
that's
know
very
sometimes
well-
it's
like,
not
I know
that
that. So
but
I'm using
Linter and Steve doesn't like it.
I got it before.
I really want to
Yeah, good.
override
I
and
get my groups and so on.
Yeah, I haven't solved this
I don't know,
one.
that's
Tim's was
When I
the
like there's
Yeah,
one
I-
has
one
multiple
versus-
sizes.
Yeah.
One of them is against
I got exactly what I want. I'm going to
two and group
discussion.
three.
It's a good life quality.
You doing all right?
Yeah.
You're doing all right for
And I
That's a
want to
really
put
good
them
way to
by
ask on the
tenants, so if
forum
I'm
or ask,
running
like I
the
said,
system,
I'm unfortunately probably the last person to make it to ask the squad on
Yeah, I-
that level.
It's annoying you. Fighting the
If I'm making any sense.
I'm
not very good
I
at
rather
you can just do it by
you can only use for
listen
to some more of that.
and then just everything from
Yeah.
As a hardening, yeah, so that you
Yeah. That-
Force yourself. I'm going to be. I'll come
That's
across
a,
Okay, right.
I see what you're saying. I'm just thinking, I still remember some of the internals. I mean, variables and facts are all kind of, and then it it's like, well, what were these just discovered facts versus actual variables getting passed to pick up like, oh, there's a variable you've set that this one doesn't take. Yeah.
There will be a big discussion about variables.
Yeah, I know. But I'm just saying like that I think the hardest part is figuring out what's actually being input versus what is being discovered from facts and everything else. So
but that's the thing you normally, that's the hard part of when you're working any role or collection, it doesn't matter. I expect some variables, but I get a lot of variables. Some might be from some thing, and you like to focus that down from, no, I only want these variables, these are mine, and the rest.
Yeah.
When you try to do import and then include or something like that, so you have like multiple roles and you first time import and second time include. This is the most mess.
But you need to stop at some level. We aren't in Inception.
Yeah, but how you like? You don't really know that you have variables from previous run inside the role.
Well, there's a bunch of the tools that will warn you if the inputs to your role aren't prefixed with the name of the role.
But if you have a role multiple times the same role, you can have a legacy from the old invocation.
Oh, you're running the same role more than once.
Yes.
You can have the position actually.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, and we tried that, it hurted us actually. We double hardened the machine. Because it appended the same rules twice.
One slight thing for collections.
There's no way of
being able
clean
to
up.
We're basically trying to make it into a programming language and it's not.
Yes,
It's not wrong, but we're trying to make it one anyway. There's no scope, which is what you're trying to, what's the problem you're fighting.
No, so it actually includes have scope, but if you do import at one place,
and that's also your filter.
You inherit. It's not like you have a global scoping or scoping at Python.
You should write variables and private.
My guess.
Especially for other tools.
It still feels it's in
right, yeah.
I
I believe there's been a proposal up a few times. Sorry, the proposal for private modules and plugins or marking them.
Yeah.
I know that's come up and then it got closed.
Yeah, the only stuff I've seen is got closed, but I think this is something that should disappear out. Should we take this?
Yes, sorry.
Talk's coming up. Oh, right. Yes, we're going to need to...
Just turn it on.
And then if you want meat on the top, just slide that left.
okay.
I think we're set. Yeah. Not too much. I would do like some kind of Jimi Hendrix and birds, you know.
Hey, how's everybody? Has everybody had a waffle? Because I'm a little bit sugar high right now, which was the plan, and I'm kind of hoping other people are too, so there's good energy. Is that true? Yeah.
Hyped up on sugar? Hyped up on sugar?
Yeah, sugar high is always good. Okay, so we're coming on. Again. Okay, so let's go. Hey, how are you? So everyone, I'm Don. I'm from the Ansible community team at Red Hat. And myself and my colleague Andre, who's here and is asking not to put him on the spot, I'm going to point out. We collaborated on on this talk to show you how easy it is to create modules, share some information, and hopefully to inspire you to create modules. So during this talk, we'll take a look at how modules work, and I'm also going to be kind of shamelessly reading my speaker notes. So if you see me looking down here, not making eye contact, that's why, but I'm nervous. So, you know, here we go. We'll talk about how modules work, go over some utilities available in Ansible core, and we'll talk about how to write module tests. There'll be a short demo. It will feature my cat. How do you tell from this? But you know, cats somehow rule the internet, so it seemed like kind of appropriate and fun. Yeah, finally we'll wrap up with an overview of how you can contribute modules and other cool stuff to the Ansible community, because that's really truly what makes Ansible great. The ecosystem and everyone who writes content for Ansible. So, you know, we'll learn for all that great automation content from our community. Ansible wouldn't be as incredibly powerful as it is today. Right, and also before we start, all these slides and everything are going to be available in the forum, so you don't need to rush for a phone to copy a URL or grab a QR code, so, you know, very fine. Everybody's on the forum, right? Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so, what is a module in Ansible? If you've written a playbook, then you've used a module, or at least specified one in a task. As you can see in the playbook snippet on this side, modules are organized in collections with a fully qualified collection name. Here you can see a task with a service module that's in Ansible core. Under the hood, Ansible's are unit modules, or modules in Ansible, or units of code. See, I told you I was going to be nervous. This is why I stick with my speaker notes, you know. But they're units of code. Could be a binary that Ansible executes on target hosts known as managed nodes. Modules are idempotent by design, and I always have trouble saying that word, even though I practice it in the mirror over and over. But idempotency means you bring the system to the desired state regardless of the current state. But if the current state is the desired state, then the modules don't make any changes to the system. So, when I first started and I added my first module to a collection, I did get a bit confused by the structure in the file system because I saw the module subdirectory under plugins, and I thought these were two entirely separate things, but in fact modules are a type of plugin. Plugins themselves execute on the control node within the Ansible process, and plugins offer options and extensions to the core features of Ansible, like transforming data, loading output, connecting to inventory, and so on. Modules execute automation tasks on a target and work as standalone scripts that Ansible executes in their own process outside of the control node. Modules interface with Ansible mostly with JSON, accepting arguments and returning information by printing a JSON string to standard out before exiting. Now let's take a closer look at module execution. And this is the fun stuff. I had a lot of stuff, had a lot of fun figuring this out and like reading through docs and doing stuff. But anyway, let's take a closer look. So on the control node, you have Ansible installed as well as the modules, either as part of Ansible core or through a collection that you usually install with Galaxy. The control node is typically a laptop or dedicated host, and the targets or managed nodes are remote hosts that you want to execute your playbooks against. When you execute your playbook, Ansible reads the YAML, validates the structure, then loads the inventory and settings from Ansible config, and does some processing, including variable resolution. Then Ansible gets into task execution for each play in the playbook. Before executing each task, Ansible looks up the module name and searches for it in the default module path or other location taken from the settings. Then it loads the module code into memory and validates parameters in the task against the module's requirements. And this approach of like lazy loading module code for each task makes sure modules are loaded only when needed and not all at once. Sometimes tasks are skipped due to conditionals like the when condition. The modules don't need to be loaded in that case, so Ansible only loads modules on demand to help save resources. And there's really probably a lot more we could talk about this, but let's crack on to the next slide. So this is the part that I find most interesting in module execution. Ansible wraps the module code into a Python script that includes the module shebang line, base64 encoded arguments, and common helper functions from Ansible core. We'll look at some of that in a bit more detail in a minute. But Ansible then compresses the assembled script and transfers it to the target host using SSH. It sets permissions and then executes the script. Now, there's some differences, depending on the managed nodes. If the target runs Windows, then Ansible wraps the module code into PowerShell scripts, uses Windows PowerShell remoting instead of SSH. Although I think in like some newer versions of Windows, you can use SSH. And there's some types of managed nodes where there's not an execution environment, like network devices. In that case, like Ansible will like execute the module code on the control node, and then it like syncs stuff across to like native APIs or some kind of protocol like netconf. So the last part of module execution that I wanted to go over is result processing. During execution, Ansible captures standard out and standard error and return values. All modules return a JSON structure that contains a change value that shows whether the system was actually modified, a failed value, if the task failed for some reason, a status message or error details, and whatever module-specific return values there might be. Ansible then processes the JSON response and updates the playbook state. If you've run a playbook before, I'm sure you're familiar with these details in the task results. And of course, something worth pointing out here is because Ansible uses JSON for results, you can actually write your modules in any language that can return JSON. So it's not just Python, it could be like JavaScript or V or Go or something. Now, slide 8. Start moving on and getting into modules. So now that we've kind of talked about like the stuff that goes on under the hood, let's get into writing a module. So the starting point for writing a module should always be taking a look at what's out there. You can find literally thousands of modules for all kinds of tasks. Obviously, if you're aware of a brand new technology or some use case that there's not a module that exists or it's not covered, then that's a good opportunity to write an Ansible module. But that's not always the case, and you don't want to, totally reinvent the wheel if something exists. But at the same time, there's no need to be discouraged if you run into a module that you think exists. You shouldn't hesitate. Sometimes modules can be in an abandoned collection that hasn't been updated in years, or the module could be badly designed, or the collection could be missing 1 or 2 modules for a particular functionality. So if you think you can do better, or if you just want to create an alternative version of a module for fun, then have at it. It's a good way to learn. But the kind of point here is that being aware of what's out there before you start writing code is generally a good idea, and it can even be a place to help you dig in. So once you get an idea for your module and what you want to do, it's important to take note of some guidelines. Probably most importantly is the Unix philosophy of doing one thing well. You don't want to create a Swiss knife with hundreds of lines of code and dozens of arguments. To the contrary, you really want your module to be precise in the aim and make things simple for users. Modules should expose the most commonly needed parameters with clear, sensible defaults with all possible values documented in each parameter. Also, a module should typically encompass most of the logic needed for interacting with a resource. If you create a module that's simply a lightweight wrapper around an API, then users are likely to offload too much logic into their playbook trying to use the module. So you want to find a balance between being concise and self-contained. It's usually a good idea to create multiple modules that interact with individual pieces of an API, for example. So finally, I mentioned idempotency a bit at the start, but this is one of the key built-in features of any Ansible module, to check whether the desired final state has already been achieved and exit without performing any actions if that state has been achieved, so that repeating the task does not change the final state. So now we should all know about how modules execute and the philosophy behind writing module code. So let's talk about the tools you need. All you really need is Ansible core and a plain old text editor like Vim. With that and the Ansible docs, you should be sorted. But what if I told you there's a package that includes not only Ansible core, but all the other Ansible developer tools that make life easier? Sounds good, right? Yeah. So, this is what I'll show you during the demo. The Ansible DevTools package makes it really easy. Just open up an IDE like VS Code and have everything integrated all nicely in one place. And that way you can put most of your focus and effort into writing a good module and trying to figure out tooling, how to structure your project. So it's a good way to dip in. Now, I did say Ansible core is a minimum thing you need, and the reason for that is that it provides the module utilities. As you can see from the import statement I've got here, the Ansible module class comes from the basic module that's available with core. That name reflects the fact that it contains the base functionality that most Ansible modules need to function properly, such as core parameter handling, system and file operation, command execution, JSON handling, basic logging, and things like process and exit status management. So if you're just starting out, I'd recommend cloning the Ansible core repo and working through the modules to get a feel for how things work. There's lots of really good high-quality modules in Ansible core, so it's a great place to familiarize yourself. That's actually what I did for this presentation. I was looking for like sort of a generic hello world kind of idea, and just kind of rooting around, and I found some inspiration, by which I mean I ripped off someone else's code, but we've all done that. So yeah. Anyway, I did put my own twist on it. There's the cats. I told you we'll see the cats. But anyway, so there's obviously a main function here. So this is the entry point that Ansible calls when the module is executed. Then you've got the module object to handle our parameter parsing and validation. There's the argument spec parameter that's required to define all the module arguments. As you might guess, argument spec defines the parameters that users specify in the playbook when they put your module to use. So, of course, if you've got a keen eye for Python, which I'm sure many of you, most of you, or all of you do, you probably noticed that what I've got here is really kind of incomplete and won't run on its own, but I've had to truncate some functions in the interest of time. I'll show the full code during the demo. But the last thing you see here is the exit JSON function. So this is one of the core module operations that sets the change to message custom returns. There's also a fail JSON function in there that exits failures with error messages and allows you to gracefully handle exceptions. So, there are a lot more useful things in the module utils, such as check mode. You probably already know check mode from running playbooks. It's a flag that, it's kind of like a dry run, so Ansible will run, but it won't make any changes. And it'll just show you, it'll report the changes that it would have made. But one of the things to point out here about writing your module code, you're responsible for the check mode implementation and ensuring that it works correctly. Ansible core doesn't actually provide functions for that. But module utilities has some other good things in there too, like some of the functions you see here that handle file operations, like get bin path, locates executables on the path, atomic move, will move files and preserve permissions and SE Linux context, which is super handy. The run command function is all about command execution and it returns standard out in the air. And then there's the Boolean function that converts args to Boolean, and it can handle different truthy values like yes, no, true, false. So when it comes down to developing the module, a lot of the heavy lifting is already done for you, so you can just focus on the logic for interacting with whatever service or system you're trying to automate. And of course, when you do write a module, you want to run some tests, and that's where Ansible test comes in. Once again, Ansible Core provides Ansible Test, so you can run sanity tests against your module code for your code quality and formatting standards. Ansible Tests will let you know about bad practices like missing documentation or PEP violations. You can also use Ansible Tests to run integration tests to verify module behavior and test interactions with services and so on and so forth. Integration tests also run against a matrix of Python versions based on the version of Ansible Core you've installed. And of course, Ansible Tests can do unit testing as well, but we're not really going to go into that here. You can find all the information in the docs when the time comes and you're ready for that. Last thing to point out, I've got Podman up here, as you can see. So, I mentioned Ansible Test runs like that matrix of different Python versions, but Ansible Test will pull down containers to do that, to make things convenient, so you don't have to install like all those Python versions on your local system. But it does mean that a container engine is required. But I'm sure everyone has that. Now, last slide before the demo. I told you there were going to be some cats. This is my cat. Yeah, it's Nora. You can't really see her, but she is a chunky cat. She's just like out killing mice every day. Like the food we feed her is not enough. Apparently, I don't know. She eats more than my kids. I'm serious. Like she beast. Anyway, she's a great cat. So. Looking at the actual details here, you'll probably notice that there are two tasks in this one. These are the integration tests that will run, but I thought we could talk about them quickly to explain what I'll show in the demo. Like I said earlier, I wanted to do like this kind of generic hello world type thing, but I just gave it a spin to create a collection named greeting in the kitty namespace. The FQCN. The module itself, I've decided to name because that's what cats answer to. And it takes two parameters, a cat's name and the greeting you'd like to use. So in the first task, we'll pass in our parameters and register the result. And then we'll use the assert module in the second task to ensure the result is what we expect. So let's see the demo. I've recorded this in the interest of time, and because I just got way too much anxiety to try and do a live demo, I just couldn't manage that. But before I start, I want to kind of give two tips. Use Ansible dev environments. That's this virtual environment that isolates your project, but it will complain if you have any collections installed in your home directory. I've actually opened an issue about this because I feel like it's kind of too strict in some ways. It can be confusing. It's almost a barrier to entry, so I wanted to mention it here. So the dev environment's a very opinionated tool in many ways, and I don't want to get all into that right now, but so it enforces the best practice of having a clean, completely isolated development environment, because there can be dependencies that try and pull in from different places. So anyway, the second thing here is that Ansible Test does expect collections to be under the Ansible_collection subdirectory, so it's necessary to have your file system organized in a specific way. And you'll see some of that during the demo. So let me see if I can get this going, and I'm going to bring this over to the other screen. I'm going to play it in this because it seemed to have better resolution when I tried it out, but it's hard to see. Okay, that's really kind of awkward, so I'll just...
What you might be able to do is like flip the laptop around and you come to this side. Then it's a lot easier to see.
Yeah. Can you guys see this anyway? Yeah. Well, okay, it's running out. We'll just go with it. But yeah, so I've opened up. I'm going into so I can place on my file system and click create. So this is scaffolding the playbook inside VS Code. So everything I'm gonna do here is directly in VS Code. So we created it and then we installed it, and I actually installed it using the development environments, which will give us a type ahead. So it scaffolded the, you can see the Galaxy YAML file, and it scaffolded the whole like collection structure. And even in VS Code, if you wouldn't do this normally, you could just like right click and create your files. Like I created the helper file where I can put in like some common functions, like the create greeting one, and then in this one there'll be the actual module code that I'm going to create. You can see I'm importing Ansible, the module utils, and then my helper stuff, and then I've got my parameters. And so I copy pasted that in, and now let's run some sanity tests. And it's really easy, like one simple command, and here you can see some errors. I thought I would show some errors just to illustrate the point. But when you look back in my module, you can see there's no doc strings, there's no examples, which would be terrible. You know, you really need that stuff so users can actually use your module in their playbooks. So now we can get into, like, I'm going to create a main YAML for the integration test, and this is again those two tasks where I provide the parameters and then like we register the result and then check the result with the assert. So really simple tests, and again like Ansible test, running the integration test is really straightforward, and you know, you can see the results right there in the JSON. So another thing that we'll see here is like the ADE, which is part of the developers tool. When I use the list command, it shows me that I've got the collection installed. So when I scaffolded the collection, when I created it, I installed it into the environment. So that gives you good stuff like type ahead. So if I'm creating a playbook, which you can see I'm doing here, because the collection is installed, Ansible lint is complaining because there's no module specified. But then here you can see there's the kind of type ahead because it's installed in that environment. And again, I'll just add my cat's name, and then we'll do a greeting. And this will let me test the playbook. And of course, lint is doing the static analysis stuff, so I can see there's some issues with the missing line at the end of the file. And then again, in VS Code, you can run your Ansible playbooks just directly by clicking on them, and you can choose Navigator or run them with Playbook. And here you can see the message that usually works if she hasn't had any food in a while. Although she comes to get me. Okay, so that was the demo. Hopefully that was okay. Yeah. Okay. And I think I'm like right on time here. So a couple things just to go quickly. If I can. Oh, sorry. Yeah, hopefully I've encouraged you enough and kind of shown how easy it is to create modules. I hope this inspires you to kind of get out and put your ideas into practice. There's a lot of great material in the documentation. You can check out the how can I help, and there's links to easy fix issues across the entire all the repos in the Ansible GitHub org. So it's a great way to like find stuff to work on and start contributing. Andre has created some forum guides, how to create a collection with a simple module, and just really go through everything for you. So these are really all the resources you need that if you're interested, you can just dive in, take a look at that, and get going. And of course, if you're on the forum, you can talk to us directly, either there or on Matrix, and we'd be more than glad to help. Of course, the forum you know, there's all the discussions going on and ways to get help, and there's more resources there to help you to find out how to contribute. So thanks very much. I guess any questions before we move on? Yes. Okay, good, thanks. Thank you very much, everyone.
Your phone again.
Grab a front row seat as well. Are you? Okay.
Yeah.
Can I go first?
Yes, sure. I was going to go here. Want to sit next to Tom or to me?
No.
Or in between? You want to make a wish?
Anyway, no, I'm fine. Thank you. You can sit here, or Tom can sit here, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, very much. Tom wants.
I know, right? Yeah.
I have a feeling.
Of you, when you want to meet up to talk about that. A coffee, but we missed each other. Maybe you know where we is. I'm here tomorrow, so I told you.
Oh, okay. Okay, he's not in red.
It's not your end.
He's not in red.
Oh, it's not in red hat.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe, I don't know. If he's selling something, it's not red. So.
Yeah, okay.
I should have told Don that I created a cowsing market.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Wait.
On GitHub. It's on GitHub.
Yeah. He's gonna say something.
Yeah. Well, normally, if you run Ansible and you have cowsing installed, then you get messages in cowsing. The problem is, I'm not allowed with a lot of systems to install cowsing. But I want, at least in the MOTD, I want to have the cow so that you immediately see it's Ansible. Ansible control, right?
Shall we start?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Okay.
4, 5, 6.
Yeah, Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks to organizers for inviting me. My name is Kirill Sadarin. I'm a principal software engineer at Red Hat, presenting personal opinion. And the talk is about functional programming design patterns in Ansible code. So, who this talk is for? So, this talk is for anyone who's using Ansible and wants to improve Ansible content creation, his Ansible content creation game. So I will be talking specifically about collection and roles. So I will not be talking about Ansible plugins or modules. So this is, there is of course from my point of view also kind of functional programming mindset also applicable to Ansible plugins and module development, but maybe another time. Yeah. So what I will be talking about. So first, of course, I do not expect anyone in this auditorium to understand what functional programming is. So I will be talking about a few things about what I feel it is. Yeah, there are many descriptions what functional programming is, and when I will argue that Ansible is actually functional programming. So there are, of course, says that Ansible is not programming at all, and this is totally fine, I think. Yeah. So you can use Ansible not thinking about any programming at all, but if you want to improve, my point of view is that you should at least sometime think about Ansible as a programming. Yeah? And I think that functional mindset, functional approach, functional view on Ansible content, yeah, so I will not be saying code, rather content, will help you to better understand few things in your content development. Yeah. So at the end I will say and probably demonstrate how you can put this functional view on Ansible to your advantage. Okay, so what is functional programming? Of course, functional programming is about functions. And there are basically two types of functions, pure functions and functions with side effects. Yeah? I will be talking exactly what pure functions are and side effects are. So also very important concept in functional programming, immutable variables. Usually in functional programming languages, all variables are immutable. So once they are created, you cannot change them. And these are some. Brings some benefits I will be talking about later. Functional programming also declarative. So you may have heard that there are no loops in functional programming because loops, for instance, they kind of dictate how you have to do stuff. Yeah? You have to start from left, finish to right. In functional programming, usually there are no loops. There are, for instance, recursions or other mechanisms like mapping to allow that. And of course, there are lazy evaluations in functional programming. Lazy evaluations in this case means that things are only computed only when they are actually needed, not every time they appear in code. So let's get started. So functions and side effects. So pure function is a function which has inputs and outputs only depend on inputs. Yeah? So basically, if you can create a table, maybe a very, very huge table, and then for each and every input, you can put output in the table, then this is a pure function. So this function has no side effects. You enter something and something falls out of the function. Anything besides that is a side effect of a function. If you print something on a display, printing is a side effect of the function. If you install package on a host somewhere 1,000 kilometers from you, that's a side effect of a function. Yeah? So functional programming and functional programming viewpoint allows to separate these things. Pure functions and functions as side effects, and separately control them. And I think Ansible is a perfect place where you can do that, or try to do that, and maybe get some benefits out of this. So, do we have pure functions in Ansible? Yes, we do. Yeah. We do have filters, which basically depend only on the input. Yeah. So, if you every time put the same input, you will always get the same output. There are filters available in Ansible. There are filters available in Ginger. You can also create your own filters. Actually, I quite recommend this. I think it was mentioned in Tim's talk, and Don talked about this just now. Yet you can, and it's actually quite easy to create plugins, especially filter plugins. Yeah? For instance, for me, I started creating Ansible plugins with exactly this filter plugin. They are more straightforward. So, what other pure functions do we have in Ansible? I would argue that arguments, or variables, how you call them in Ansible, they are also pure functions. Yeah? So here we have 5 functions. They all take an argument, and they are all defined in var's main file in our role. Yeah? And they can consume this argument hello configuration management camp. So let's see maybe how it works. So first, maybe a quick introduction to the environment. I will be using this demo environment along the talk. So we have this Ansible collection, which is called functional.ansible. Functional is the namespace, and Ansible is a collection name. Yeah. We have several roles. And playbooks to execute them. So we have this how to view the collection, and we also have this terminal where we can execute stuff. So we have a list of playbooks we can execute. And don't focus on the exactly how it's done. I will be using make here. The point is that we just there are playbooks to execute these roles. Yeah? Just quite simple. So let's start with functions. So we have these our 5 functions, and we call them with different arguments. And the functions, as I said, defined here. Yeah? So as you can see, and I will talk a bit later about this, we can define functions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's an argument, but we don't define argument at all. because we will talk about this, Ansible is lazy. You don't need to have an argument in any function if you are not calling this function. So let's call this function, make functions. Yeah, we did that. So we have this, our 5 functions called. Nothing fancy happened, nothing changed, except we have this output, right? So we barely have any side effects. This will be, of course, important later. Okay. Functions with side effects. So of course in Ansible we have Ansible modules which are doing always something. They're changing configuration of the host, they're installing packages, changing configuration files, etc., doing API calls. They all have side effects. Yeah? So can we kind of control these side effects? So here's again just an example. Every time we print something, here is a side effect, we printed something. Yeah? So everything in Ansible seems to have a side effect always. How can we avoid them? I will try to demonstrate how to do that. Another important concept is immutable variables. So in imperative programming language we have a equals 5, and then at some point in time we print a. So what will be printed? Any guesses?
Hopefully 5.
Anything, right? Because in the middle there are 3 dots. We could have changed anything, and in order to understand what will be printed, we have to read the whole file, maybe several files. We have to understand the whole code, find all the A's or whatever changes, mutations of this variable we are doing. We have to find them. In functional programming, it looks the same, but it's completely different, right? Because here we're saying that the A is a name, and we're calling the name A is now some expression 5. Actually, it will not be immediately calculated that as a 5, so you can put anything there. Yeah? And actually the same thing happens in Ansible. So there are 2 things actually here. And you will see all the things we are kind of combining all the time. So here we have immutable variable A. We have expression on the right. We don't have to calculate it. Similar that I demonstrated as an argument. We don't have to have right-hand side in order to have this expression, right? And here if we print, we will always get A. Yeah? So let's see how it looks like in the demo. So we have, of course, here we just printing something. So any guesses what will be printed? This is code. So we have hello here, we have hello here, we have hello here, we have hello here. Let's try that. I will clear the screen, make. So actually what we will do, we will of course set the environment, so set the variable, this is now hello, then we will print this, and then we actually register this, so this is actually result of the previous step. Yeah. So why is it so? It actually works, but why?
The register overwrites the hello.
Sorry?
The register overwrites the hello.
Yeah, register overrides set facts. Yeah? And in Ansible, there are variable precedents. You can go to this link, and you will see following. So how I read this? Yeah, this might be a bit confusing. There are like 22 lines. Yeah. So how I understand this, and I think this is important part. So every time Ansible reads, it reads from the bottom to the top, so from the last one to the first one. And if it couldn't find anything, it just moves up the line until it finds some line. So if you have external variable and it's set, then Ansible will use this value. So this is the way to change it. Yeah? So this is the way you can read in Ansible. So you cannot actually change a lot here, where you can change dynamically. Of course, you can change in the host file and so on. This is more statically, not during Ansible playbook completion. This is only one place, set facts and registered facts. So my point is that you should not use setfacts, yeah, because this is you are changing something, yeah, and this will force you to read the whole file, basically to understand the whole file. One aspect of functional programming is it's declarative. Yeah, so here we can either use an imperative for loop, or we can just say that we need only even numbers. Yeah. Same here with Ansible. Ansible is declarative. Ansible modules are immutable, so we just say what we want. We want packages installed. We don't check if they are installed. There are of course Ansible modules which are breaking immutability, and yeah, sometimes you can't find a way around it, but usually it's the case. Ansible modules are immutable, and this is a good thing. Again, lazy evaluations. Important concept in Ansible. Every time you have something on the left and on the right, you don't have to have right part at the same time when you describe this. So if you have this in your vars file and you don't use these variables, you can put whatever you want there, or if you use them, you just have to define at one of these 22 levels or layers. Yeah, you have to define all the arguments. This is actually quite flexible. So let me demonstrate. So we have this our lazy evaluation, and we have all these variables defined in our vars file in the role, and actually the role does nothing. So we don't require these variables. So again, we are running the playbook, and nothing happens. So we didn't define any variables, we didn't require any variables. Ansible is fine with that. Okay, so how it makes any sense for Ansible? So I would argue that you have to rely on PR functions because first, it's easy to manage them, it's easy to understand them, and you have to separate your whatever you change from whatever Ansible does, like in package installing or changing configuration files. And I will try to demonstrate it later. Immutable variables, so try not to use, to set any variables with setfacts. Yeah? So if you want to use them, you actually can put anything how you want to use this variable in vars files or in defaults files, because you can define their variables on the left side, which requires something which you get only like 5 tasks in your playbook. You don't have to have a 6 task setting this as a fact when you can have it either in defaults or in vars files in your role. Actually, I never tried it to make it in like inventory file. Maybe it will even work. Yeah? So Ansible is declarative. So if Ansible says it will install package, or you tell Ansible to install package or configure file, it will do that or fail. Yeah? So you don't have to worry about if this package exists or not. Maybe you have to worry about permissions or something, but so demo time. So we have this how to role, and this role does a few things. So it kind of installs packages. So these lines, they emulate package installation, but we can substitute them with the package installation actually. And they install packages, some packages. We don't know, but usually the packages we install, they depend on the like OS version or whatever other parameters. So this is a variable, but variables are functions, and we can have these functions depending on like OS family in Ansible. So let's take a look how it is done, or how it's possible. One of the options. So this is our mapping. So we actually have this how to packages, and how to packages is a function which says that depending on Ansible family, you have to use different lines. For Debian, SUSE, for RHEL, You have to use different packages. They are the same here in this example, but you can have them the same, different ones, right? You can have this like many parameters. So this is basically a function, which is pure function, right? So we can test this. We don't have to test. We don't have to provision the host, 3 hosts in this case, Red Hat, SUSE, Debian, right? Install packages there and then test that they are there, because we know that Ansible can take care of all the actions. If we say Ansible install packages, it either install packages or fail. So why do we test Ansible every time? We create host, install packages, and check package if Ansible install packages or not, when we just can test if Ansible is getting the right data, right list of packages. And we have two things separate. One are actions, package installation. Another one, how to get the list of packages. How do we get them from OS family or from any other host parameters, which we don't have to have here right now. So at this very stage in VARs, we don't have Ansible OS family because we didn't collect any facts, but we don't care. So let's take a look at our file, main file. Yeah. So in order to test this, what do we need? We don't test actually packages. So let's remove this. Here, this is again just debug action, so we print something, but let's assume we are sending email to the listed administrators. Again, we rely on Ansible to send the email. We know that it will do that, yeah, right? So we will not test this. So let's remove this. And this we will just not test, sorry, I don't have an example for that. Yeah? So this is what is left to test. How to test this? Okay, so I will undo that, all of that. I do have this no operation file, so there is actually action in Ansible no operation, so I prepared a special file, and we're gonna use this to test our role. And we have this test playbook. So what we do, we call the role, but we don't call the tasks from the main file. We call the tasks from the no operation file. We don't do anything. Yeah? And this is also important. Public true means all the variables will be available after this task is done. All the variables created inside this task will be available later, right? So we executed this test. So we actually create. I forgot one important thing. We have inventory file. Yeah, this is our 3 hosts. And instead of actually provisioning the hosts, we just provide the data, because for pure functions we need an input. And here's an input, our OS family. Yeah? So we are testing this pure function and relying on Ansible to do the rest of the work, to install package. We don't have to provision the host for that, right? So this is exactly what we do here. So we just run in the role. Remember this node file, it has nothing, right? But Ansible also takes care of, then we include this role properly, it will basically create all the variables, so it will create all the functions, right, for us to test. And then we assert that this how-to package is actually the name, yeah, contains whatever package we want. And the admin, there is an admin me in the list of admins to notify. And that's basically it. So what we did here, so we used functional view on Ansible code in order to separate actions, which Ansible controls, and Ansible doing this actually very great job, from what we do. How do we get the list of packages from whatever OS family or any other parameters we want? And we can test this without provisioning any hosts. Yeah. that's all what I wanted to share today. If there are any questions. Okay, sure.
Not a question of this statement. It's interesting to see lazy evaluation as a function.
Yeah.
But it's totally right, it is a function.
Yeah, the comment was that it's interesting to see that lazy evaluation is a function, but and it looks right. That is, it is a function. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to take a moment to once again encourage you to have a functional view on the Ansible code, because there is actually much more. Functional programming also involves composing functions, yeah, and we can compose functions in Ansible using pipe and all the filters, and I think it will simplify your life and create Ansible content. And again, thank you for your attention.
Other room, when you were doing the talk there, the camera was still on. I think we missed the first few minutes, but I turned it on when I went.
Still waiting.
Okay, we could do that. Maybe I'll buy you one.
Well, it's just the first few minutes, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's something that's always out there.
Oh, it's working.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, this looks good.
Yes.
So then, this is correct, right?
Yeah. It was close, but I just sent a message. Because this is fine to be here because I
No, it's broken. Sadly.
Probably I was okay. No other instructions.
Yeah, I guess the screen again. Or I want a different screen. Yeah.
It should be fine.
Thank you. Hello everyone. My name is Sorin Sparnea. I work for Ansible. I'm the team lead of Ansible DevTools. I think that by now you already heard a lot about DevTools everywhere. But this talk is a little bit different. It's again about quality, but it's trying to give you some insights on how to implement the testing on your continuous integration pipelines. Hopefully you already have some of them. But I will ask, it's like in the room, who has any kind of CI pipelines running on their Ansible content? Okay. So I think almost 50%. Out of this, how many are using GitHub Actions? Probably half of. I guess the others might use stuff like Jenkins or something else.
GitLab.
GitLab, okay. Now, the bad news is that my talk will cover only GitHub Actions. But the good part is that the way the GitHub Actions are designed and the way we do integrate with them, it's to make them very easy to implement with other CI systems. So it's part of how can we write smaller workflows in GitHub Actions just to put all the logic outside so it can be reused. Why did I? Okay, full screen. Okay, I guess this is already known by now that we just want to minimize the time we would spend maintaining the content and keep it green and usable. And also not to have many surprises when a new version of Python is released, a new version of Ansible is released, or maybe some of the collections that we are using as dependencies, or Python dependencies. Once people start to use your content, you'll have to pay the big price for it, because this is when you'll have to help them sort the problem they find, and guess what? In many cases, they use it in a different way that you planned. So it's like, okay, you implemented a very cool, let's say, role that is doing something, and you plan it to make it work on, let's say, Fedora, and someone is running it on Arch. So start like this. And more bugs. If you do not, the main idea here is that if you do not have good CI pipelines early on, you might struggle to be able to cope with, it's like your kid will become your new job, on top of the old job. So yeah, CI, do not trust people saying that it works on their machine. Trust only CI, because even on CI, it does vary. Sometimes it can be a glitch and so on, but it's more trustable than any developer machine. I would say that probably as a developer machine, I do not trust mine. And yes, I would advise regarding, because this is something that is quite a common question, I would say, how much do I test? Because how many combinations, the test metrics and stuff like this. Obviously you want to test what you have now in production, but you also want to see what is the next one. Now, based on each one ability to be more bleeding edge or not, you might even want to test with unreleased versions of Ansible, like the devel branch. It is possible. And is like if you are developing a very popular collection that is very active and lots of people are using, you might want to increase it. Obviously, if there is something that has very few, like, I don't know, 10 users worldwide, probably you'll stick to, let's say, moves slowly. This is a graph that I think this is the third time when I use this graph, because I need to remind some people that might not have a development background regarding testing pyramid and the cost of testing and the type of testing. The main idea here is that always when you start to test, start from the bottom. Do not go at the top and try to avoid, because everything that is higher on the pyramid has a higher cost. And by cost, it's both money and time. And this is why we have the linters and the static analysis at the bottom. They are the easiest one to implement. Even just packaging your content, it's a way of testing it. And this is where you have the Ansible Galaxy and Ansible Lint. The next one would be unit testing, but this applies only if you develop modules, right? Because if you want to test roles and playbooks, this is where you end up with functional and integration. And this is where a molecule is supposed to use, to help you. Regarding manual testing, I will not cover this. Obviously that I recommended it. There are special cases where people need to do manual testing, but what can I say other than use your common sense to do manual testing when you already know that you do not have all the things covered, or it's something that is unique, that you do not expect to have the same need again. Do the manual testing for these changes. I already mentioned that Ansible Lint had a static analyzer. There is something more important to mention about it, is that Ansible Lint acts also as a meta-linter, meaning that it's also using other linters inside. And one good example would be that it does a random Ansible test sanity. So you have a lower need to run Ansible test sanity. I will explain you why you still want to run it. It does run YAML lint, so there is no need to run YAML lint separately. And also it does run black. Black is the code formatter for Python. So once you run Ansible Lint on your code base, probably you can cut at least 2 of them from the list. Regarding the first one, the Ansible test, there is a catch, which I will mention. Is that Ansible Lint runs with a version of Ansible that you determine and a version of Python that you determine. Most of the time, you do not run Ansible Lint with all the entire metrics of supported versions of Ansible and Python. But when we test Ansible sanity, we do usually run with all of them to have a much better results. The reality is that the chances of not catching a problem because you only run with one version is less than 1%. So it's like 99% of the sanity issues will be detected just by running with one version. But on CI is different, right? You run Lint probably before uploading the change. But other stuff might take too long and you might forget about. For unit testing, you have PyTest Ansible, which also allows you to see like molecule tests as Python tests, which allows you to easily combine them. And yes, for molecule and Ansible test integration. Now, for already mentioned. Okay, so the first method to integrate testing for your content with GitHub would be to use Ansible in GitHub Action. If you go to GitHub Marketplace and you search for Ansible lint, you will find this action. It's called Run Ansible lint, and I will click on it to. In fact, I can click right now, right, to see how it looks. So this is the main page for it, and there are lots of people using it, and I also have some details about it. The best part about it is that this is released from the same repository as Ansible lint itself, so it always has the same version as Ansible lint. And if you use Dependabot to update your dependencies, it can update the version that you are testing. But let me go back to the presentation to show you something interesting here, because this is something I discovered while writing the presentation. 26% of the users using this action are just running from main. Which means that Ansible lint, even from the main branch, it is pretty stable, because otherwise people will go insane, complaining that breaks every time, or you made another change. So 26%, I would say, it's quite huge. My expectation would be like 5% or 10%. Maybe this is because this is the example directly from the page of the action, and people copy paste. Yes. So without, even if we mention that you should put a specific version if you want to be 100% sure that, but if you only put a fixed version there and you do not also create a configuration for Dependabot to update your GitHub actions, you might miss the new stuff, and obviously life is like usually we do not have the time to watch what happens with all the hundreds of dependencies in all the projects. So we rely on computers to remind us when there is something new, and even to test them. As you can see, adding the action does not require any extra arguments. Usually, there are some that you could for special cases, and it's basically one line, because all the other stuff are standard for any GitHub workflow. Does anyone have any questions regarding using a GitHub action like this? Now, when you try to take to the next step, this is where I would introduce the Ansible content action. This is a relatively new GitHub repository, which was created by the networking team, and which is maintained by Ansible DevTools team combined with the networking team. And we didn't have time to advertise it too much to the community and others, but it only aimed to contain the workflows for testing collections. Yeah, I would recommend anyone to look there, because it makes much easier to do instead of starting to write them from scratch. It's not very hard to write GitHub pipelines, but I would say making them stable does require a huge amount of time. It's like also testing minor details and stuff like this. So now it is used in production by more than 10 collections from networking, and I guess that soon this will grow. But I will explain you what plans we have, and I will also show you how to get information, because for GitHub actions, even when you look at the official documentation, it's very hard to figure out what you are supposed to define there. I know that GitHub is doing is putting a lot of effort trying to document them, but the reality is that documentation kind of could be improved. But the best way to get information about how to use something is to use the search and look at what others are doing. And I'll show you here some example about how to find information about this, because you already know the name of the action. So, because most of the projects are open source and available, you could, if you want, you could use GitHub search, but GitHub search is not very powerful. There is something else, which I'm going to find hopefully here. Yes, is source graph. I don't know who knows about source graph. If I can zoom in, let's see, I should be able.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah.
The URL, okay. So, source graph, it's third-party system. You don't have to log in to use it. Probably you see that I'm not logged in, which is indexing the source code from GitHub and allows you to do like advanced searches on GitHub. And in my case, I did look for the path GitHub, because this is where we have the workflows, and I look for the uses of this action. It's like only this string. And it does show me which projects are using it and how. And the best part, it's also sorting the results based on the popularity of these projects. And the more popular a project is, the more likely it is to be better maintained. Because also the age of the changes does affect the sorting. So you are likely to find someone that is using it correctly at the top, not at the bottom of the search. Guess what? I'm using this to also measure popularity of different other stuff online. Even dependencies, Python dependencies. It's like, okay, let's see who is using something or different patterns. Because you just look for some usage and see, okay, what people are doing. Because if you see that the only ones using it were like projects that didn't receive any updates in 2 years, probably I will start to wonder, it's like, okay, maybe it's just a leftover from history. Okay, so now option number 3. Now this is in fact not even a different option, it's just to give some more details regarding what is happening behind the scene when you use these actions. Because they do, the content actions do to make use of Talks Ansible, which is a small Talks plugin that our team wrote, which basically makes Talks recognize collections and expose the versions of Python and Ansible that are supported in the test metrics. So instead of, probably, how many people have experience using Talks as a test tool? Okay, so I'll say about 10%. I'm not so surprised because usually it's it is a tool used mostly by Python developers to test, because it does create virtual environments, so on. So it's like if you are not really a Python developer, you are less likely to know to use it. But guess what? You don't need to use the tool to as a developer. The difference is that with this plugin, it's almost an empty configuration file, and you just run the tool, and it shows you which test it can run, because basically it does infer the configuration from the collection, so you don't have to maintain the configuration file. Basically, the only thing that you might want to configure in Toxin is telling it that you don't want to support a specific version of Ansible or Python, stuff like this, because it does guess the range of Python versions and the range of Ansible based on the metadata that you have on your repository. But sometimes you want less. You want to skip different combinations because you do not have let's say, the time or the will to support some of them. And the magic here is that this means that with a single command, you can run a specific test locally. The same command is used on CI. And on CI, these content actions to ask Ansible to report which jobs to create. So the list of jobs that you see locally, like in fact they are called in Tox environments, but they are like jobs, tasks to run, are the same with the one that run on CI. So this is the magic part, that you should not need to touch the GitHub workflow, even for adding or removing a new job, because this comes directly from the Tox configuration. It's like, because there is no need to skip something on CI, but want to run it locally, even if it is possible. But you just define the default list. So, just to give you an example, this is what happens when you have the plugin installed and you run inside the collection. By default, it's creating these environments, and you can run them directly. Now, this is one of the commands that is used internally by the actions for reporting the list of jobs that should run. This is JSON, and basically this is what GitHub is processing in order to create the test metrics with all the runners. It's not something you have to write, it's just something that is used. But if you want to debug at some point to see what happens, you might want to run the command locally, just to know. Now, there will be some extra changes that we plan to do on the content actions, to even make, I didn't show you, I'll show you just after this, how they are used, because we can go to a repository and see, and I already, so if you want to see who is using the actions, I showed you the search here, and I guess that the first collection, Ansible, not this one. Okay, this one. So right here, Ansible utils. Okay, this is a very popular collection. So we can go to this repository. In fact, I think that content actions. Okay, I just make a change half an hour ago. I propose a fix here, but what I want to show you here is how this repository is using the workflows. We have the tests here, and okay, basically this is the definition of the workflow, and with the type of tests that are running. It is a very simple workflow which does not need maintenance. Now, in the next version, we plan to make it, now it is about 45 lines. We'll make some changes to make it about 10 lines. So even smaller. Just because we might want to introduce at some point some other type of jobs, and we want to allow you to control if they run or not directly from the Tox file. So this is the only thing that will change, but it will be at some point this year, and changing it will be, probably 5 minutes or something like this. So it's not like you have to rewrite the configuration, basically just remove something. Does anyone have any questions? Things that maybe you faced and you didn't know how to do on CI?
Questions will arise when we play with this.
Obviously. So, but yes, do not be afraid to raise issues directly from the repository. Obviously, you can use the forum, and I'll have a slides very soon, I think. But so this is relatively new, as in making it more public, I would say, because it's already used by the networking team for about a year, I think, and it didn't require too much maintenance. So there are some stuff that we also want to add in the future, which are quite unique. I would say these jobs could easily run like 30, 40 GitHub runners, because once you make all the combination between Sanity, Unit, functional, Python versions, Ansible versions, and so on, you figure out that okay, this is going to, it might prove to be either slow or expensive, or both. Obviously, you can configure it to reduce the number, but like skipping different versions. But one thing that we can do is we can chain the same type of actions one after another inside the same job. This is something that we tried probably about a year ago with our Python project in DevTools. We have something very similar to this, but for Python projects, not for collections, because our projects are Python projects, where we wanted to reduce the number of GitHub runners. And basically, we chain, for example, we keep the, instead of having different runners for each Ansible version, we just run, let's say, sanity test with Python 3.13 with all the versions of Ansible that are supported by it, one after another. The downside of this is that if it fails the job, you need to look at which task it failed. Because when you have them all separated, you know that, okay, it failed with this version of Ansible. Now you will know that it failed with this version of Python only, and only when you click on it, you'll see that there is a different task that failed. And obviously, they will take longer, each of them, but the total is usually much shorter. So it's like just by doing the chaining, because you already download dependencies only once, the final duration for let's say, the entire workload, you end up with the final results much faster. And obviously, when we introduce this, it's going to be like optional. You can either use the normal matrix explosion, or you can use the chaining as a trick to reduce the load. Yes, and as you know, please use the forum. And obviously, if there are real bugs and so on, do not be afraid to use GitHub. We are quite proud to read all the bug reports and try to address them as soon as possible. Yeah.
Thanks.
If anyone has other questions for the DevTools team, find me. I'm still here.
Is there a public repository that showcases all of the best practices that you showed us?
I think not a single one. So we do have a set of repositories, and I would say that for stuff like this, probably Ansible Content Actions is a good start for it. We do also have the Ansible DevTools repository, which is like, you could say, the beta one, that has some documentation that applies to all the products. And when we will add more documentation about the workflows, this will be the place where we will add it. Because it does cover more, right? So it's like, it's very hard to squeeze it in only one product, like putting it in Ansible. No, because it is beyond Ansible. Content Actions, okay-ish, but I would say that probably ADT repository even better. Yeah.
Against which targets do you run your to
Like the runners.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so right now they use the default runners, but there is already support to use different runners if you want. So you can use the same metrics, to generate jobs that would run on different platforms. And be sure that one of the things that we will add an easy flag for you to also enable testing on macOS, because this is something common that people forget about. macOS is a little bit different than Linux, even if it's Unix. But it's not the same Unix. And lots of people, including myself, right, as developers, we use a Mac as the desktop. Obviously, I don't know anyone that is deploying stuff on a Mac, right, in production, but as a developer machine. So it's very useful to also test content on different platforms. And it will just be as part of Tox itself. And you'll be able to say exactly the name of the runner. Obviously, the defaults would be the current one that are used by GitHub, but you'll be able to override it. And if you are curious to use it for Python projects, ping me and I can show you the implementation that we use for Python.